live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. In this video, we're going to talk about Is There in Truth No Beauty, which I think is a great episode title. So in this episode, the Enterprise is transporting the Medusan ambassador Kolos, along with the woman who's going to make a mental link with him, Miranda Jones, and what's the other guy's name? Lawrence Marvick. So Marvick is one of the designers of the Enterprise. So Scotty's really excited to have him on board. Not 100% clear why he's even there, but it is what it is. Miranda Jones is a telepath, and so she was raised on Vulcan, trained on Vulcan. She can do a mind meld with Kolos. That's the whole sort of point, because the Medusans have, I guess, devoted themselves exclusively to beautiful thoughts and to sort of mental prowess, etc., etc. But the downside is that they are so hideous in their sort of formlessness that no human can look at them without going mad. Spock is able to be around Kolos with the help of a red visor, because for whatever reason, Vulcans, when they wear this visor, they can look at Medusans for at least short periods of time without going insane. We find out later why Miranda Jones is able to look at Kolos with the visor. But she initially puts it down to, I was trained on Vulcan and I learned their techniques for mental discipline. Lawrence Marvick is really into Miranda. She is not really into him. And so Marvick decides, I'm going to go kill Kolos, which he does not do. Kolos opens the box, shows himself to Marvick. Marvick's like, no, I'm insane. I'm going to go down to engineering and basically hijack the Enterprise and take us out of the galaxy, which is apparently into a weird sort of pinkish strip, which is not actually how the edge of the galaxy works, but, that is what it is. So Marvick takes them out. in past the edge of the galaxy, and now they're like, oh shit, we can't navigate back to the galaxy because we don't have any reference points, and our instruments don't know what to make of the fact that there are no recognizable reference points. So, then Marvick dies. Not that he could actually have helped, but what they decide is that Spock is going to mind meld with Kolos because the Medusans are incredible navigators, and Spock knows how to run the ship. Kolos probably can navigate them out of the outside of the galaxy's space into which they've gone, and so that's the plan. Miranda is not real cool with this, and she's basically like, no, just teach me how to run the ship. I'll mind meld with Kolos. All good. At which point McCoy is like, yeah, the problem with that is that you can't run the ship because you're blind. And Kirk and Spock are like, what? And Miranda's like, how did you know? And McCoy's like, well, it's kind of obvious if you think about it, but like, you know, this wasn't really my place to say until now when it became a question of you can't actually run the ship. But she's got like a super advanced sensor web on her garment that allows her to basically tell way more information than a sighted person can pick up through seeing. So the problem is that is not going to allow her to navigate the ship because there's visual components on screens that she simply wouldn't be able to censor accurately enough. So she is convinced by Kolos that him mind melding with Spock to save the ship is the only possible solution. That happens. Kolos / Spock, the sort of dual personality, comes out and he's like, hey, this is great. I've got a body. I can talk. I can, see you and move around and whatnot. Totally new experiences for me as Kolos. Navigates them out of the non-galaxy and then has to go back and break the link. However, Kolos Spock does not remember to put back on the red visor. And so, when that mind link is broken, Spock is looking directly at Kolos, no visor, and Spock goes insane. Starts, beating everybody up. They finally manage to subdue him. And basically he's, unconscious, and Miranda Jones has to reach down into his mind and, pull him back up from the depths of insanity, or he's going to die. It's initially not super clear that she's keen on doing that because she resented Spock being able to mind meld with Kolos before she did. But Kirk basically comes in and gives her quite a brutal, reverse psychology session where he's basically like, you suck because you don't want to save Spock because you're small and petty and jealous. And then she's like, all right, Spock, we're doing this. I'm going to fucking save you. And she does. And then everything sort of works out. Miranda and Kolos go off to the planet of the Medusans. And, everybody's happy. No harm, no foul. Except Marvick, who's dead. But who gives a shit? Because he was just in this half of the episode and he wasn't the central character. So, No. So there's a couple of big social justice issues here that I think are very, very obvious. One is directly discussed in the episode. There's a discussion while they're all at dinner and everybody is relentlessly hitting on Miranda in very problematic ways. But there's a discussion because Spock mentions this prejudice that goes back to the ancient Greeks, probably actually beyond that, but we know the ancient Greeks believed this generally to be true, that what is beautiful, what is good must also be beautiful. And then Marvick gives us the counter belief to that, which is that what is beautiful must necessarily be good. And this is a big thing because they repeat several times the idea that the Medusans are so ugly that looking at them causes madness. But Miranda gives us the alternative at one point, because Kirk says that, and she says to him, "Who's to say that Kolos is too ugly to bear or too beautiful to bear?" And I think that's a really interesting point. There is the common cliche, right, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But the idea that that the Medusans must be hideous because their appearance causes madness seems very problematic if almost no non-Medusans can look at them without going mad. Like, how do you tell whether that is overwhelming ugliness or overwhelming beauty? But there's also major problems about investing the idea of beauty or attractiveness with an ethical dimension, or a dimension of worth, assessing the worth of a being through their attractiveness. And this is especially problematic in US culture, for instance. This is especially problematic as far as women go, young women especially, teenagers, adolescents, into their 20s, primarily, where women are disproportionately told through media, through society, through various social messaging, that their value is disproportionately dependent on physical attractiveness. That is, they have to meet other people's standards for beauty in order to be considered of value. And, I mean, this is the roots of a lot of eating disorders, a lot of body dysmorphia, things like this, anorexia, bulimia, things like this. So it has extremely negative real-world implications to have this sort of discourse surrounding beauty as an ethical good, or as something that makes a being worthy. The other big social justice element I would say here is from a disability studies perspective. Miranda is blind. We accept that. I mean, that's the reality. She acknowledges that. McCoy acknowledges that. She hides that. That only comes out when McCoy has to play that card to prevent her from trying to run the ship in a way that she is, at least arguably, not physically able to do. This is an interesting thing. Partially because of the reason that Miranda hides her blindness. Because remember, she's a natural telepath, and what she explains is that she needed to go to Vulcan to be able to shut out the thoughts of others. And she tells Kirk pity was the worst emotion. She experiences pity from others, and it's not just that she, perceives that. She actually hears other people's pity. I don't even know if hears is quite the right word, but, she experiences that. The experience of them pitying her is part of her mental life. And the fact that that is a default, almost, reaction to a person with a disability is problematic, but not surprising. So there is that element in terms of, how do we understand and treat disabled people? And the fact that Miranda does not want it to be known that she's blind is because of it is out of a recognition that that will be the reaction, that people will pity her in ways that, in this case, because of her censor web, because she has these tools, these techniques that make her actually better adapted than a sighted person. But because she has this disability, she will be pitied, and she knows that. And it is for that reason that she keeps that disability secret. This is still very much the case in, for instance, U.S. culture. Disability is still looked upon as a negative attribute, a thing to be pitied, a thing that one should desire to avoid. And this is problematic because it reflects into the ways in which people with disabilities are treated within our society. And we've come a long way, I think, from the 60s in terms of creating public accommodations, public infrastructure to support people with disabilities, but there's still a lot more that can and should be done. It's an ongoing problem.